Welcome to Inspiring Change, the podcast where we explore the ideas and innovations shaping our future. I'm Maurice, your main host, and together we'll venture into the intersections of leadership, AI, strategy, and sustainable living. My co-hosts for this journey are Google's AI-powered research assistants from Notebook LM, whom I've named Sarah and David. They'll help guide us through rich stories, deep discussions, and insights that inspire meaningful change. Join us as we uncover not just what's possible, but what's next. This is Inspiring Change.
Ever feel like leadership's kind of like one of those choose your own adventure games?
I see where you're going with that.
But with like real consequences, you know? Not just, oh, you choose the wrong path, now you're back at the beginning.
Right. The stakes are a bit higher when it's people's livelihoods on the line.
Exactly. And that's what makes this story, The Journey of Trust, so fascinating. You listeners sent this one in, by the way, and I gotta say, it's got me hooked. Okay, so picture this. Lagos, Nigeria. Energy everywhere, right? And right in the thick of it is Greyhound Financial Fintech Company, on the rise, all about innovation. The story actually says, trust was the cornerstone. But
There's always a but, isn't there?
isn't there always? Profits are down, investors getting that nervous look in their eyes, and that trust. Yeah, it's starting to crack a bit. This is where things get interesting for us, though. We get to step into the shoes of Alex Okoro, rising star at Greyhound. He gets called back to, well, basically save the day.
The weight of the world on his shoulders. Classic narrative setup.
Classic. But it's more than that for Alex, right? I mean, the story mentions Greyhound once felt like home to him.
Yeah.
So there's that personal connection, that extra pressure.
That personal stake. Smart move by the writer.
Yeah.
Adds a whole other layer, you know? Suddenly, it's not just about spreadsheets and bottom lines. It's about people, relationships, emotions. That's where trust really lives and breathes.
Absolutely. And to make things even juicier, we've got other personalities swirling around Alex. Aisha Bello, his executive assistant, super loyal, seen it all. You can tell she's hoping for the best, but bracing for, well,
Impact.
exactly. Then there's John Smith, the investor, British, very. Let's just say he's not afraid to make his expectations known. Oh yeah, but also there's this tiny bit of hope in him, like maybe, just maybe, Greyhound can pull it off. So the stage is set, Greyhound's future's up in the air, Alex is back in the game with like all the pressure, and you, dear listener, are calling the shots. Which brings us to the first big decision point, right at the end of chapter 1. Greyhound is seriously hurting, needs a trust intervention, stat. The story lays out 3 options. Lead with transparency. Full honesty, company-wide meeting, hoping that even if it's uncomfortable, it'll bring everyone together. Option 2. Show strength, take control. Alex lays out a super clear action plan, projects this aura of, don't worry, I've got this. You know the type.
Oh, I know the type well. Seen it work. Seen it backfire spectacularly.
Right, it's a gamble. Then there's option 3, and this one's interesting, empowerment. Alex taps into the team's collective brain power. Brainstorming session, hoping to reignite that passion, that feeling of ownership. 3 paths, each with its own, pros and cons. But before we get into how each one plays out, I'm curious, from a brain science perspective, what's going on when we're in a crisis of trust? How do these different leadership styles tap into that?
That is a fascinating question. You see, our brains, they're wired for survival, right? Always scanning for threats, always trying to keep us safe. And trust, that's fundamentally about safety. Believing someone or something is reliable, that it won't hurt us.
So when Greyhound's in this crisis mode, everyone's on edge. What's happening up there?
Think of it like this. There's this part of your brain called the amygdala. It's like an alarm system, constantly assessing risk. Greyhound's in trouble. That amygdala, it's lighting up like a Christmas tree, sending out signals that can trigger that fight, flight, freeze response.
Okay, so we're hardwired to protect ourselves. Makes sense. But how can a leader like Alex even begin to rebuild trust when everyone's internal alarm system is going haywire?
That, my friend, is the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And where those different leadership styles you mentioned come into play, each one, the transparency, the control, the empowerment, is going to hit that amygdala differently. So let's walk through that transparency route first, right? Alex calls the company-wide meeting, stands up there. Everyone's looking at him, probably wondering if they still have jobs by the end of this. And he just lays it all out. No sugarcoating. The financial struggles, the doubts, everything.
Bold move.
Oh, incredibly bold. And remember, the amygdala, that alarm system. For some folks in that room, especially anyone who's been through a corporate restructuring before, this level of honesty, it might actually ramp up that fear response at first.
Like ripping off a Band-Aid, right?
Yeah.
Got to sting a little before it heals.
Precisely. And the story, it nails this. Chinedu Okafor, he's one of the senior developers, super sharp guy. He just comes right out and asks, how do we know this time will be different?
$1 million question, probably on everyone's mind, but he's the one who actually voices it. What's Alex do?
He gets real, like genuinely real.
Mm-hmm.
Story says he responds with, because this time it's personal for me. He's not just some consultant brought in. Greyhound matters to him.
Yeah.
Deeply.
And that vulnerability, it kind of disarms everyone a bit, right?
It's powerful. The story mentions a palpable shift after that. People open up, share their own concerns. A little glimmer of hope starts to peek through.
It's fascinating how honesty can do that, even when the honest truth is kind of scary.
The brain is a funny thing that way. But we were talking about those different leadership styles, right? What happens when Alex goes full take-charge mode?
The control path. Laying down the battle plan, everyone falls in line. What's the brain doing then?
Dopamine, my friend. Our brains are wired to love a good problem solved, a goal achieved. So when Alex presents that action plan, clear steps, everyone knows their role. It's like a little dopamine hit.
So a little hit of the feel-goods to get things moving makes sense. But we both know those dopamine highs, they don't last forever. What's the downside here?
Well, the dopamine loop, it can be a bit of a double-edged sword. See, those quick wins, they feel great, but they can also make us crave more. Constant pressure for the next hit.
So if you're always chasing the next milestone, never stopping to catch your breath.
Burnout city. Population. Everyone.
And when people burn out, trust goes out the window, right?
100%. And that's what the story highlights so well in this path. Cake, the marketing lead, he's energized by this whole move fast, break things approach. But Fatima, from product development, she's worried. Points out that the team needs support, not just directives.
The classic leadership tightrope walk. Results versus well-being, tough spot to be in. So we've got transparency, we've got control. What about empowerment? That feels like a whole other beast.
It really is. See, when Alex chooses that path, the brainstorming session, he's tapping into something primal. Our brains crave connection, collaboration.
We're social creatures, even in the corporate jungle.
Exactly. And when we feel heard, like our ideas matter, that sense of ownership, it triggers a whole cascade of brain goodies. Dopamine's in the mix, but also oxytocin, the bonding hormone, and serotonin linked to well-being.
So it's not just about the thrill of achievement, it's about feeling like you're part of something bigger than yourself.
Precisely. And that's incredibly powerful for building trust.
It's amazing how these leadership styles, they're not just abstract concepts, they're literally playing out in our brains, chemicals and all.
Our brains on leadership, fascinating stuff, right? But let's get back to the story.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to talk about leadership styles, it's another to see them put to the test when things get really real.
It's easy to talk about leadership when everything's going smoothly, right?
Textbook scenarios, best case outcomes, everyone's got their game face on.
But it's those curveballs, those moments when the pressure's on, that really reveal what a leader's made of. And that's where we find Alex in this next chapter of The Journey of Trust. Project Catalyst, that was their big bet. Supposed to be Greyhound's comeback story. But, well...
Anyone who's ever worked on a tech project knows it's never smooth sailing.
Never. The story throws in some good old-fashioned technical glitches, a little regulatory red tape for good measure. Project Catalyst hits a wall. Now, remember how Alex chose transparency? He was upfront about the challenges, but with this new setback, he's got another choice to make.
Uh-oh. Big decision time.
Does he stick with that honesty, even if it means admitting that Project Catalyst might be doomed? Or does he switch gears, project that everything's under control vibe, even if he's not so sure himself?
That is the million-dollar question for leaders, isn't it? When do you level with people, even if it risks shaking their confidence? And when do you project that steady hand at the wheel, even if you're internally freaking out?
Because hiding doubts might seem like the strong move in the short term, but long term...
breeds suspicion, mistrust. It's like termites, eats away at the foundation.
And then the whole thing collapses. So how do you find that balance? It's like you said, when do you level with people? When do you project that confidence?
There's no magic formula, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I think the best leaders, they have this almost like sixth sense. They can read the room, feel the energy, know what their team needs to hear in that moment.
It's almost like intuition on top of all the strategy and planning.
Intuition grounded in experience, I'd say. You can't just wing it every time. But yeah, there's an art to it, for sure.
Speaking of art, and, well, maybe a little science. What about Alex on the control path? He had that action plan, that initial burst of productivity.
Dopamine doing its thing, quick wins, feeling good, right?
But then reality sets in.
Yeah.
Longer hours, everyone's getting a little sharper with each other, that whole we're in the trenches vibe.
The dopamine trap. See, our brains, they're wired to want more, more, more. So you chase that next win, then the next and the next.
And then eventually, something's got to give.
And usually it's our well-being that takes the hit. That feeling of safety, of being able to breathe, it vanishes.
And that's when things can get, well, a little messy, which the story captures perfectly, by the way. Fatima, that sharp product development lead, she sees it happening. She goes to Alex, expresses her concerns about burnout.
Brave of her. Not everyone's willing to speak truth to power like that.
Totally. So now Alex is at a crossroads again. Does he ease up, listen to Fatima, acknowledge that maybe he's pushed too hard, or does he double down on that control, convinced that it's the only way to get those results? Now, for a change of pace, let's visit Alex on the empowerment path. Remember, he put his faith in the team, hoping to tap into their collective genius to get Greyhound back on track.
Delegation, collaboration, all those good things they teach in leadership seminars.
Exactly. And at first, it's like a breath of fresh air. Everyone's throwing out ideas. The brainstorming session is buzzing. But as with everything, there's a potential downside.
Because trust, it's not a set it and forget it kind of deal, right? You've got to keep nurturing it, keep tending to it.
Like a garden, you can't just plant the seeds and walk away.
Exactly. And what the empowerment path really highlights is the importance of focus. You could have all the great ideas in the world, but if they're not aligned, if everyone's pulling in different directions.
Chaos. And chaos is not exactly a trust builder.
Not at all. It creates uncertainty, anxiety.
Yeah.
The opposite of what you need when you're trying to rebuild trust.
So as the journey of trust comes to a close, it leaves us with more questions than answers, which I think is kind of the point.
The best stories often do, don't they? Leave you thinking, reflecting.
If Alex goes all in on transparency, will it inspire his team or send them running for the hills? If he chooses control, will he get the results at the expense of, well, his team's sanity? And if he sticks with empowerment, will it be a beautiful symphony of collaboration, or will it devolve into a chaotic free-for-all? I won't spoil the ending. You'll have to check out The Journey of Trust yourselves for that. But what I will say is, this story, even though it's fictional, it gets at something very real about leadership.
And about trust.
Yeah.
How fragile it can be, how easily it can be broken, but also how powerful it is when it's nurtured and protected.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, think about those choices Alex faced. Which ones resonated with you? Because the best leadership lessons are not just things we read about, right?
They're the ones we wrestle with, the ones that keep us up at night, the ones that make us better leaders, even if it's just a little bit, every single day.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Until next time, keep those leadership dilemmas coming and keep trusting your gut.